So, namaskar, friends, and welcome back. Let us, talk about Amitav Ghosh, as I said. And to me, he is the most potent, most significant contemporary Indian novelist writing in English at the moment, as his fiction is distinguished by its deep historical research, global settings, and exploration of complex cultural, political, and environmental issues. So, Ghosh combines his literary artistry with scholarly insight, making his work both intellectually rich and narratively compelling. So, friends, talking about Amitav Ghosh, we are going to see the range of his thinking. He is a prolific writer, very well read, very well researched, and that's why his understanding of the process of dislocation, relocation, marginality, diaspora, they are also very, very broad. If we look at some of his details, he was born in 1956, is an Indian writer, won the highest literary honor of India, the Gyanpith Award in 2018, also won the Sahitya Academy Award in 1989, and was awarded the Padam Shri in 2007. This itself tells us about the prestige he holds among the contemporary writers, and his oeuvre is full of writings of all kinds. And well, if we talk about some of them, the Circle of Reason, the Shadow Lines, Calcutta Chromosome, Glass Palace, The Hungry Tide, and his Ibis trilogy comprising Sea of Poppies, River of Smoke, Flood of Fire, his Gun Island, Jungle Nama. These are all very important works. If we look at his prose, it is elegant. His characters are well drawn, and his historical sense is remarkable. He brings the past to life with meticulous research and poetic sensitivity, and he is one of the few Indian writers in English who has managed to bridge the gap between the intellectual and emotional in his fiction, and has not really allowed any to overpower the other. So there is that kind of balance in his approach. His novels are a rare fusion of deep research and storytelling, which I told you earlier. They bring together multiple understandings of human condition, as he draws from anthropology, history, and politics without ever compromising on the narrative power of a creative writer. So, he is one of the most important figures in eco literature. His ability to fictionalize the slow violence of climate change sets him apart in the contemporary literary world. Most of his works deal with the themes of diaspora, such as different aspects of displacement, migration, dislocation, identity, and nostalgia, and migration caused by colonial trade as indentured laborers. Well, they find their place, let's say, in Sea of Poppies. Migration caused by war, finds place in the shadow lines. Migration or displacement caused by ecological upheavals finds prominence in the hungry tide. So we'll find that he has been talking about multiple migrations and displacements caused by different regions, and tries to reflect on the life of people. In the shadow lines, the characters of Trideep, Thamma, and the narrator blur the lines between India, England, and Bangladesh. In The Glass Palace, he shows how diasporic characters preserve memory through struggles across Burma, India, and Malay. In novels like The Hungry Tide, Ghosh also explores environmentally driven displacements. Here, migration is not only caused by politics or economics but also by climate change and environmental degradation. So, if we look at his novels, we'll find that uh, his novels don't really talk about border crossing for a certain purpose. Rather, they are cosmopolitan in the sense they talk about displacements that have their effect on the global population. If we look at his other novels and try to look at them from the diasporic point of view, we'll find that the Circle of Reason talks about migration, rootlessness, struggles of immigrants. The Shadow Lines, as I said, it talks about cultural dislocation, identity crisis, nostalgia. The Glass Palace talks about longing for homeland, exile, quest for identity. In The Hungry Tide, he portrays cultural displacement, adaptation to new environments, etc. So, we find that his novels abound with the themes of diaspora. Um, the Shadow Lines is a novel interwoven with memories and history, where he accentuates cultural displacement in the novel. It is based upon the 1964 riots in Calcutta and Dhaka, and the protagonist of the novel is a nameless narrator who hankers for knowing the truth behind the death of his cousin Trideep by digging the past. Thamma, the grandmother of the narrator, migrated from Dhaka and moved to India during the partition time. She remembers every detail of her life in Dhaka. She represents the diasporic people as she is tormented between the past and the present. When she comes to know that her father's brother Jetha Mosai lives in Dhaka, she tries to bring him to India by going there along with her sister Maya Devi, Trideep, and their London family friend Mary Price. Moreover, one of the characters, Ela, hates the restrictions in Indian culture and chooses to assimilate to the Western culture by marrying Nick Price. Amitav Ghosh explored themes of rootlessness, migration, identity crisis, alienation, and cultural assimilation through the character of Ela, capturing the complexities of her diasporic experience. And I quote, "Do you see now why I have chosen to live in London? Do you see? It's only because I want to be free." Free of what? I said, free of you. She shouted back, "Free of your bloody culture and free of all of you." So here, he talks about the people who find their own culture restrictive, and that is why they embrace Western culture in search of uh, personal freedom. It's all very well. You are going away now, but suppose when you get there, they decide to draw another line somewhere. What will you do then? Where will you move to? No one will have you anywhere. As for me, I was born here and I'll die here. So, well, the character Jetha Mosai says that come what may, our roots are ours and we only belong to our roots, where nobody can really, uh, you know, turn us out from. But then what happens if you go to another country and you are not accepted? In the years that followed, living in Calcutta in a one room tenement in Bhawanipur, she would often think back on Dhaka, the old house, her parents, Jetha Mosai, her childhood, all the things people think about when they know that best part of their lives are already over. So the sense of loss is acute once you lose your home, wherever it is. In The Hungry Tide, Ghost presents diaspora not only as a physical journey across borders but also as a psychological and emotional condition that is shaped by history, environment, and identity. And here we find that each character reflects a different phase of displacement, whether global, internal, or historical, making this piece of work a profound meditation on the meaning of home and belonging in a transnational world. One of the discussions that uh, always centers when we talk about the diasporic world. It deals with the diasporic experience of the Bangladeshi refugees trying to create a world of their own in the tiger reserve island called Morichapi, and ending up in ultimate destruction. So, when the refugees tried to settle in Morichapi, the government forces them to evacuate the place where the dreams of these settlers less valuable than those of a man like Sir Daniel, just because he was a rich sahib and they impoverished refugees? So it's a very pertinent question, in fact, but underlines the sense of displacement and derangement for these people. Ghosh delineates the agony of these refugees through these lines, and I quote, I saw them coming, young and old, quick and halt, with their lives bundled on their heads, and I knew it was of them the poet had spoken when he said, each slow turn of the world carries such disinherited ones to whom neither the past nor the future belong. So he talks about the rootless existence of these deplorable people. Again, I quote from the novel The Hungry Tide. Once we lived in Bangladesh, in Khulna Jila, one of the divisions and districts in Bangladesh. We are tired country people from the Sundarbans age. When the war broke out, our village was burned to ash. We crossed the border. There was nowhere else to go. We were met by the police and taken away. In buses, they drove us to a settlement camp. We had never seen such a place, such a dry emptiness. The earth was so red it seemed to be stained with blood. For those who lived there, that dust was as good as gold. They loved it just as we love our tired country mud. But no matter how we tired, we could not settle there. Rivers run in our heads, the tides were in our blood. So he talks about a very poignant situation where people are not always forced by colonial rule to displace from their uh, roots, but then there are climatic changes that are also forcing them to leave behind their work, leave behind their place, and lead a precarious life, as it happens in this novel. Well, these people are forced by climatic changes, by the tides, to leave their place. They cross over and come to India, where they are treated as refugees and they are taken captives. But nonetheless, they may have a desire to go back once the tides subside, because you know your roots are always dear to you, howsoever fragile or vulnerable they may be. These lines are stating the experiences of refugees in the novel. So we find that Amitav Ghosh problematizes this process of migration, and is also asking us to ponder over it, whether this has to be taken as a deliberate attempt to cross borders, and should these people not be valued as human beings rather than illegal immigrants or refugees? In The Glass Palace, which is an epic historical novel, he traces the lives of multiple generations across Burma, now Myanmar, India, and Malay, that is Malaysia, weaving a narrative that is deeply rooted in the diasporic experience shaped by colonialism, war, migration, and identity formation. So we find that his approach to diaspora is completely different, in that he's not talking about the movement of post colonial subject to UK and USA. Rather, he's talking about the migrations that have happened in and around the country, and how have they shaped lives, and how have they left their deep scar on the psyche of the people. So Glass Palace examines diaspora from multiple perspectives, including indentured servitude, colonial trade, wartime upheaval, uh, and crisis of post colonial identity. And these elements underscore the instability of the notion of home and reveal how historical forces leave a lasting impact on individual and collective identities. The novel's structure broadly revolves around two significant parallel upheavals: the British conquest of Mandalay in 1886, which resulted in the Burmese royal family's exile and the establishment of British dominion, and the 1947 Japanese invasion of Burma and Malay, leading to a large scale displacement of vulnerable Indian migrants. So the story reflects the degradation of Burma, once considered a golden land untouched by poverty and illiteracy, into a state of poverty and political decline. And by examining the rise and fall of dynasties, the novel emphasizes the inherent instability and transience of political power. After the exile, the royal family experiences homesickness, often reminiscing about their memorable days in Burma's royal palace, known as the Glass Palace. So, however, the family members found very uh, difficult in leaving their home culture and being accustomed to the host culture, and this can be evident from the princes of the royal family. So, friends, if we look at this novel, The Glass Palace, we find how the Burmese royal family, in exile, they feel homesick, and they are always thinking of their glass palace. Um this is symbolic of how the diasporic subject always is nostalgic about its roots. And whether you are royalty or you are a common person, in the earlier novel, we have seen how in Hungry Tide, the people who are commoners and who have been forced to evacuate because of a rising tide, they still think that they will go back to their own country once the tide subside. But uh, the political scenario is such that they have crossed the borders and have landed in India, and that is why they are taken captives. Now, Amitav Ghosh, always questions these divides of nations and national boundaries, and always vouches for having a cosmopolitan view of human life, because the human life as such is vulnerable, and that's why uh, that vulnerability has to be taken care of, rather than indulging in these superficial divides. So, well, if we look at his novels, we'll find how he talks about situations and truths that govern the life of individuals as well as the communities on this planet called Earth. And one of the significant aspects of his creative vision is his understanding of colonialism and empire and how it has affected the lives of people, especially in this part of the world. He often critiques imperial ideologies and unveils their economic and social consequences, as we find in the Glass Palace itself, where he examines how British colonization in Burma and India, affected the lives of these people. Again, in his Ibis trilogy, he explores how British mercantile interests led to opium war and lot of displacement. Um, this excerpt from the Glass Palace. In their early years in India, the princesses usually dressed in Burmese clothes, clothes, angis, and estamines. But as the years passed, their garments changed. One day, no one quite remembered when they appeared in saris, not expensive or sumptuous saris, but the simple green and red cotton of the district. They began to wear their hair braided and oiled like Ratnagiri schoolgirls. They learned to speak Marathi and Hindustani as fluently as any of the townsfolk. It was only with their parents that they now spoke Burmese. So, this is how there is this cultural loss and cultural gain, as we find in these lines. The princess of Burma, how their life changes once they are exiled from their own country and land in India. On the one hand, there is loss of their own culture and their economic standing as well. There they were part of the royal family. Here in India, they are leading the life of a commoner, and it does not only change their geography, it also changes, and they acculturate in India as they change from their Burmese clothes to Indian sari, and they also learn the local language as they start speaking Marathi and Hindustani in the Ratnagiri. So, well, Amitav Ghosh looks at this whole phenomenon as a phenomenon of loss and gain, and ultimately believes that the lives of people on this planet have been shaped and reshaped by such precarious conditions. So, as I said, colonialism and empire, they have been one of the favorite themes that he has explored in his novels. As I said, he mixes history, politics, anthropology, and presents a very massive picture of the world in his novels that are so thoroughly researched. Um Migration and diaspora, as I said, uh, is one of the prominent features of his novels. His characters are frequently migrants, crossing oceans and borders, both voluntarily and under coercion, as we have seen in An Antique Land. Is one of the novels in which he juxtaposes the journey of a 12th century Jewish merchant with Ghosh's own experience in Egypt. In his Ibis trilogy, he showcases the forced labor migration, particularly of Indian indentured workers, and even in the use of language, uh, he shows certain kind of hybridity. He is known for mixing languages, as in his novels will find. Even in this particular passage, you can see there are two Burmese words that I found difficult to pronounce. So he always tries to, present his multicultural world in a language that is suitable, and itself shows this kind of hybridity where different communities mix up and bring together all their differences to create a new reality out of it. So he is known for using a mix of languages: Hindi, Bhojpuri, Bengali, Arabic, Chinese, and English to reflect cultural hybridity and colonial multilingualism. He coins and revives historical terms, enhancing ethnicity, authenticity, and immersion. In Sea of Poppies, characters speak a Creole of English and Indian dialects, so casing linguistic diversity. Environmental crisis and climate change, they are very, very important in his novels. As I said, you know, he talks frequently about the environmental and climatic changes and the displacements that are induced by them. um, in his later works, especially The Hungry Tide and The Great Derangement, which is a non fictional work, he addresses the ecological crisis and critiques the failure of literary fiction to engage with climate change. In his Gun Island, he blends myth and ecological disaster, portraying climate migration, rising seas, and supernatural signs of environmental distress. Myth, memory, and identity, they are also one of the prominent features of his works, as he often draws from mythologies, oral histories, and non Western epistemologies to challenge Eurocentric views of knowledge and history, as we see in his The Calcutta Chromosome, where he challenges the myth and historical, projection of the finding of malarial parasite and its vaccine. He merges science fiction, mystery, and Indian spiritual traditions in this novel to explore alternative histories of science. So there is a Eurocentric history of science which ascribes the invention of malarial parasites vaccine to couple of Britishers. He projects an alternate history which is never discussed in any of the historical accounts, to show how in reality the Indians played a very important role in such scientific discoveries. His narrative technique is also very, very rich, as he keeps on experimenting with it. Most of his stories are non linear, as he frequently shifts from past to present, weaving together multiple timelines at the same time. And not only that, in his novels, we find multiple or polyphony of voices, where there are multiple narrators, and even blends the genres. He combines historical fiction, travel writing, magical realism, and speculative fiction. So that also makes his creative world quite intricate and rich. His descriptions and details are so rich, especially when he writes historical novels. His attention to material, culture, language, and setting is just marvelous. So, if we look at him, and if we look at his creative oeuvre, as I said, he is one of the most potent voices of the modern times, and also let's say, prolific writer. Like, he has brought wonderful historical fiction in Sea of Puppies, River of Smoke, and Flood of Fire. And again, contemporary eco fiction in The Hungry Tide, sci fi uh, in the Calcutta Chromosome, sci fi modern fiction. In Glass Palace, he talks about war, migration, and empire. And through a family saga in historical fiction, Gun Island is, talking about climate change, myth, and migration, and it is part of climate fiction. And In an Antique Land is blending history, anthropology, and travel, and is kind of hybrid which combines both the fiction and non-fiction. So if we look at his literary world, we'll find it is quite enriching, complex, and layered. So, dear friends, Amitav Ghosh is a novelist of exceptional breadth and depth, and his works blend rigors of historical research with rich narrative imagination to tell stories that span centuries and geographies. And through his novels, he interrogates the forces of empire, the complexities of migration, and the urgency of environmental change. He stands at the intersection of literature, history, and activism, making him one of the most important literary voices of our time. If we look at his diasporic concerns, as I said, they are central to his preoccupation, where he explores how historical forces, particularly colonialism, trade, war, and climate change, have affected and shaped the movement, displacement, and identity of people across continents. And his diasporic characters are not just immigrants in the modern sense, but also historical migrants, indentured laborers, exiles, and transnationals caught between cultures, languages, and loyalties. So he frequently talks about displacement and migration, cultural hybridity and identity, uh, as we find in his Ibis trilogy. In Sea of Puppies, the sea Ibis becomes a floating microcosm of a hybrid world where caste, religion, language, and nationality, they are all blurred. In his In an Antique Island, he contrasts the uh, experiences that he had himself in Egypt with that of a 12th century Jewish merchant from India, showing the long history of cultural cross pollination. So, his vision is quite broad that way, as he builds his narratives around memory, history, and roots, and talks about the history of mankind in colonial, post colonial, and global context rather than confining himself to a narrow boundary. Ecological displacement also finds a very important position in his novels like The Hungry Tide and Gun Island. So in Amitav Ghosh's fiction, diaspora is not just a condition of exile or loss, but also one of creation, adaptation, and interconnectedness. He portrays diaspora as a long standing historical reality, not a modern anomaly, and emphasizes that fluidity of identities shaped by migration, memory, and global forces is a reality. So his works resist nationalist and essentialist narratives instead of offering a cosmopolitan, multilingual, and layered view of human movement and belonging. as he shows that diasporic lives are deeply entangled with colonial histories and present day crisis, from imperial trade to environmental collapse. So he looks at it as a continuous phenomenon, and but whatever may be the reasons, diaspora and migration, they are integral parts of life. If we contrast him to Jhumpa Lahiri or Salman Rushdie, will find that there is continuity and change as far as his preoccupation as a writer is concerned. In Sea of Poppies, he reconstructs the 19th century Indian ocean world to highlight the diasporic experience of indentured laborers, emphasizing the structural forces, colonialism, caste operation, and economic exploitation that uproot his characters. And the ship Ibis becomes a floating world of displaced identities, where languages like Bhojpuri, English, and Sailor Creole intermingle to reflect a hybrid culture in formation. In contrast, Salman Rushdie's The Satanic Verses portrays diaspora not as historical inevitability but as psychological and spiritual exile, using magic realism and postmodern irony to depict the fractured identities of Muslim migrants in Thatcherite Britain. His characters undergo grotesque transformations, signaling the destabilizing effects of migration and cultural mimicry. Meanwhile, Jhumpa Lahiri's The Namesake turns inward, focusing on the intergenerational tensions of a Bengali American family. Her minimalist style captures the silent estrangement and identity confusion of the second generation immigrant, whose struggle is less with historical forces and more with personal belonging. So, together, these authors reveal how diaspora can be experienced across multiple registers: systemic, symbolic, and emotional. So, friends, Amitav Ghosh happens to be one of the most important writers, and in a way, our discussion that we started with V.S. Naipaul, uh, we also find that here is an author who encompasses a very broad view of diaspora, mm, rather than focusing on one particular aspect of diaspora. So, he to me is one of the uh, writers in whom diaspora finds most extensive manifestation. So, friends, these are some of the references. Thank you very much. Please join me in the next class for more discussion on diaspora. Thank you very much.